Glad you are tuned in. This is my Africa Channel Television, broadcasting from the Ronald Reagan Building here in Washington, D.C. I am Daniel Ofori-Boafo. The G8 and G20 summit has just been rounded off in Toronto, Canada, and my Africa Channel TV was there to do a full coverage of the entire event. Interestingly, 7 African heads of states were there for the summit on the invitation from the host country, Canada. However, permanent African representative at the summit over the years, Ethiopian Prime Minister Menelik Zenawi, as usual, led the group of African leaders to the summit. MAC TV was able to get the Ethiopian Prime Minister for an exclusive interview conducted by Menelik Zeleke, MAC TV President, at the Sheraton Hotel in Toronto, venue of the summit. Over to you, Menelik.
This is Menelik Zeleke. We are here at location here in Toronto, Canada, following the G20. We're broadcasting you for My Africa Channel TV. We're here today because there is the G20 and G8 has been here in Canada, Toronto, for the last 3 days. It has been a long 3 days of different changes that has been discussed here at the G20. Now, the G20 history goes back to 1999, and as we have moved forward beyond that, we have had many different changes in our economics. Our economy of major proportions has affected major countries throughout the globe. Here, as the concept has been formed and formalized on the for the G20, is to help the developing countries and smaller countries to move forward. We have a very important guest here today with us, speaking as the voice of Africa. Welcome, Prime Minister Menelik Zenawi. The Prime Minister just had gone through an election in Ethiopia, which was most favorable. But we are trying to also understand why that we are not receiving the kind of support from the major countries that they are providing to other countries. Prime Minister, can you tell us, as you were a spokesperson in regards to the G20 that was in Pittsburgh, have we gone any further from Pittsburgh to today as far as developing of Africa?
I think we have made a lot of progress since Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, the initiative of President Obama with regards to food security that he had announced at the G8 summit in L'Aquila in Italy was reconfirmed by the G20. And that program has now been operationalized. In addition to that, in Pittsburgh, the main agenda was how to rebalance global growth. And in that context, we raised that Africa should be part of that rebalancing of global growth. Africa should not be treated as a basket case, as a lost case. It's part of the solution to the problems of economic development globally. That has now become official G20 policy. We will be endorsing a new framework for development and engagement between Africa and the G20 in Seoul in November. Finally, we began to participate in the G20 meetings at the initiative of the hosts of those meetings. First time we participated was in London because the then Prime Minister of the United Kingdom invited us. We wanted to institutionalize this. We didn't want this to be at the discretion of each host of the G20 summit. We wanted to get that here in Canada, and I believe we got that. So since Pittsburgh, we made quite a lot of progress.
And as you have indicated that there has been some progress, but how is it that we continuously to be invited instead of having a seat for Africa that speaks for Africa? We know that we have the body of the AU African Union, and we know that there are the basic initiatives that is in Africa, whereas all of the sources of resources are in Africa. We know that there are countries that is going to Africa and becoming very financially independent, but seeming like still they are leaving Africa out. 2005, that the G20 had allocated over $50 billion for Africa development. However, and smaller countries rather, and they have not yet kept their promise short of $10 billion. Where are we in regards to having a seat at the table? I think it was spoken at G8 by the Nigerian president, Jonathan Goodluck, that we should have a table at the a seat at the table in regards to the affairs of going forward in our perspectives of Africa.
Again, as I said, when we started out in London, the G20 summit in London, we were invitees. This time around in Toronto, we were given 2 seats, and we were allowed to participate at all levels of the process of the G20 summit. Now, what we wanted to get from this summit is that the African Union itself gets to determine who speaks for Africa. And we got that. We got that now here in Toronto. And so as of Toronto, by, let's say, the next meeting, which is going to be in Seoul, we'll be there, not by the grace of the country that is inviting us, but as a matter of right. So that is a major progress. With regards to the resources that were promised in 2005 at the G8 summit in Gleneagles, the United Kingdom, one of the things that, as you know, prior to the G20 summit, there was a G8 summit here. And I participated in that meeting too. And we were able to review the performance of both sides of this contract. It's a sort of a contract between Africa and the G8. So we reviewed how Africa was doing in terms of fulfilling its own obligations and how the G8 was doing in terms of fulfilling its own obligations. It's a mixed bag. The G8 has made some progress, but not enough. And so I believe there's an understanding now that first we should be able to do better next time around, and second, instead of reviewing performance every 10 years or so, we should be able to review our performance every year or so that we can identify shortcomings in terms of fulfilling obligations in time and to be able to correct them in time.
We see that Ethiopia market economically is growing faster than primarily many throughout the developed world, as well as those of the undeveloped world. It has been recorded that Ethiopia GDP has risen over 11% within the last 5 quarters, or 5 years. At any rate, we're concerned about other African countries. We know that all the resources that is when the Chinese just enter into Africa, and the United States and others are going to Africa, more or less providing support and loaning money to Africa. They're going to also benefit from those resources by purchasing or bringing out the raw material, like uter oil, for example. Use the Liberians' connections to build their force of rubber, and their turns return back and sell it to Africa. Ethiopia is doing fantastic for its economics. I just left the country about 2 months ago, and I was looking, and I was there 5 years ago. I turned around and I was there again to sign the contract to bring ETV for the United States. which is very well successful, as we have to state also. But as I see things, I looked at the highways and the development that's coming into the country, the new AU building that's coming up. What are we developing, or why are we looking at this success? How can we count the success that's coming into Ethiopia, and most of the other countries of Africa is still seem like they're going backwards?
Well, luckily, we in Ethiopia are doing very well. We've grown at double-digit rates for 7 years now, and that's among the highest in the world. Not all African countries are doing well, partly because of lack of stability. At times it could be a matter of policies that are put in place. One of the things that we wanted to do at the G20 summit here is to develop a common framework, a common policy framework that would guide both Africa and the G20 in terms of transforming Africa into a new growth pole. Africa is a continent of 1 billion people. If it were to grow as fast as, let's say, Ethiopia is growing, we could in no time be as important as, say, India in the global economy. And that's what we meant when we say Africa should be considered as a part of the solution rather than merely as part of the problem. And given this new framework that we are working on, I'm sure the rest of the continent, those who are not doing as well, will catch up.